Hi there, and welcome to session number 3, Inclusive Online Student Spaces. My name's Heather Hilz-Fitzgerald, again here within the Roma Land School District. And I'm happy to be sharing some great information on how we can make our online classrooms inclusive. So some of the things we don't always consider when it comes to supporting our learners are just physical needs. And there's been a sharp movement in supporting students with disabilities in the last few years that really focuses on inclusive practices and how we can make learning spaces relevant and accessible. So thinking back to your previous classes, which students had IEPs or 504s? Or quite possibly, which of your general education students needed different interactions, support, or content? Knowing that disabilities can be seen or unseen, and taking these into consideration when we plan our learning should be a vital component. About 5 years ago, for myself, I was presented with the idea to work closely with our specialized academic instructor. And in some cases, we have previously referred to that as RSP. But together, that co-teaching relationship that I had began really allowed for creating rich learning experiences for all of our students. Whether those students were students with IEPs, GATE students, students with 504 plans, and everyone else in between, we used our strengths as educators to create an inclusive environment that supports all learners. And so no longer were her students just were her students. Actually, they were rostered to the gen ed classroom. And she became the co-teacher that was including not only the kids on her caseload, but also the students within that classroom. And I will say that during that time period, the students within that classroom had so much more than just academic support, but rather developed patience, tolerance, acceptance, and empathy for the diverse learners we had in our classroom, just as we have in our classrooms each year. So I think this is always going to be a pretty consistent trend when opening up with most things that are being as important as they are for educators, and that is developing that online community. Again, as we stated in the first session, teacher presence is key. Getting to know your students, getting to know their families, reviewing their cumulative folders in order to understand needs. Knowing your students' backgrounds, first off, shows that you're interested in that child individually, and it will also help you gear instruction for them too. So again, suggestions for those first few days are to hold that Google Meet session with families. That way you have the ability to connect and understand who they are, and may even be possibly able to walk through Google Classroom, show them what the assignments are, show them what the weekly learning plan looks like, and offer that connection that shows that they can trust you, and you also have the ability to develop their familiarity and their confidence while supporting their learner at home. Also, those weekly whole group meetings can really help set the tone for the engagement and expectations for the week, and making sure that there's opportunities for your open office hours, because sometimes during those whole class Google Meet sessions where you're trying to drive a mini lesson and be specific about the instruction that you want to push out, but having those open office hours allows for your students to check in with you or reach out for support if needed in much more of a safe and one-on-one environment. And then obviously sprinkle in that fun. A lot of times we need to think outside the box and not always be academically driven. Giving opportunities for students to have fun, to interact with their peers could definitely be the motivating factor, and really just that lighthearted fun that we all need during these times. So when we're transitioning to an online learning option, we also then need to really consider our students, and we need to be aware of the accessibility that our students possibly can have through the use of technology. The Web Accessibility Initiative is a great place to start. It helps to start viewing your learners and how they are interacting with the online experience. And this is just the simple acronym right here, POUR, because as we're creating our online learning experience, our online learning platform, we need to keep in consideration these elements. Is it perceivable? So thinking about our students who may wear glasses or have some type of other visual impairment, are we designing the space so that it is visually accessible to our students? Keeping in mind your colors, font sizes, providing video overviews or tutorials, or even if establishing some type of website, knowing text alternatives and other added apps for support for students who may need just that extra tool to be successful. Is it operable? Meaning being aware of the student's ability to interact with the keyboards, the pace of the content being presented to them as well. So keeping in mind if our students have maybe a 504 plan that works towards occupational therapy, being aware of those types of things so that you could potentially adapt or modify a lesson that would best fit their needs. Is it understandable? Is the content being presented easy to understand and to the point? Again, going back to that idea, less is more. Specificity is key, and if we need to provide even more accommodations or modifications, those should be provided if necessary. And ultimately, robust. So is the content easily accessed through supportive online programs and or assistive technology? And later on, if you're able to access this slide deck, I believe that the POUR acronym little poster there will lead you to a really great site that includes the Web Accessibility Initiative, which will hone in to specific supports needed for each type of learner. One thing to keep in mind during this time period as well, because we're really focusing on that idea of personalized learning and providing individual instruction as we go through and analyze different data based on whatever formative assessments we're giving to our students. But ultimately, thinking about that idea of universal design learning. So again, personalized learning is a component to our vision within the Romaland School District, and also our district provides SAI for all grade levels, and we even have our RISE program that helps support students as well. So thinking about all of those diverse learners, we need to continue to support all those learners and really have the foundation of an MTSS system, a multi-tiered system of support. Universal design learning is not a new concept, but it's something that we should constantly go back and revisit to deeply root our pedagogical practices in order to support not only the academics of our students, but also the social emotional learning. And if you get a chance at some point, I have a really great video from SAI instructor at Boulder Ridge, Anna Cole, and she gives her perspective or overview as to what universal design learning is. So again, think of universal design learning as the framework of your learning experiences, making sure that your students are engaged, that they're being provided with multiple means of representation, and being able to have different ways to show their learning through action and expression. Really thinking about the whole child. So one thing that I found that I think is extremely valuable is this source here called Open Access. And this really does take in consideration all of our students in being able to provide them with tools that can help them be able to succeed as to where we need them. And this is through obviously the use of technology. In this link, you can see lots of different tools that will help support students with reading, things that are within the internet, allows them to make modifications to possibly the display of their screen, helps with audio support, and so on. So this is a great toolkit for teachers to use to help support students. And obviously, besides that, we have Google, and their motto for students in this inclusive realm is that they would love to provide accessibility for all students. In this image here, which I actually am going to pull out of because these are all hyperlinked, and I really love this saying that they place on their accessibility page. It says, when all students can fully participate in the learning experience in their own way, everyone benefits. That's why we create Google for Education products with accessibility in mind to help every student learn, be inspired, and achieve their full potential. How beautiful. So each of these are going to be different either guidelines or also articles as to how Google themselves is constantly revamping and constantly creating tools that will help students within the digital world. So feel free to take a look at those on your leisure because there might be some really great stuff that will help support really creating that inclusive environment online. I'll go ahead and stay out of the presentation mode so we don't have that lag. Another key component, as I had mentioned before, because we have specialized academic instructors, and a lot of times we need to reach out to our specialized academic instructors because the opportunities for co-teaching can be such a positive influence to not only you as an educator, but also to all of your students. And so ultimately establishing those relationships with teachers, even in your grade level team, can create those bonds, can create those sharing of expertise, creating those environments in your classroom where it's real life, where you have adults working hand in hand. And so feel free to reach out and get the expertise from your SAI instructor, as well as SAI instructor, working collectively with the gen ed teachers too, to share resources and or instructional strategies. Because when that takes place, especially when you're able to have some of those co-teaching models, you'll notice that you're able to create these different types of instructional moments with students. So not only are you having a SAI instructor in your classroom, maybe supporting the students with just IEPs, but instead you have that SAI instructor helping support all the students in your classroom. So think about having two adults within one classroom and the opportunity for small group instruction that can really hone in on what students need individually. Think about ways of actually teaching a lesson together and seeing how and having students see in real time what it looks like when adults are collaborating and working appropriately with one another. Again, another great option is your station teaching from blended learning. And if you think about stations in a virtual world, you definitely could use the gen ed teacher as a core instructor for one of those stations, monitoring and guiding those students at that specific station. And then you have another adult, your SAI instructor expert, that could also be monitoring and supporting students within that station. So again, getting two educators with that small group setting, even if you're doing it in a virtual realm. So that being said, a lot of ideas were poured out, a lot of tools and articles for you to go back and look at. But ultimately, there's a lot of things that we already do in our classrooms that are inclusive, and they just come natural to us as educators to help support each individual child. For your activity, when you head over to Google Classroom, you're going to partake in an action storming activity. There, you can list ideas you have based on inclusion, and that is also looking at inclusion within the online setting. From there, those ideas are always great, but you know what's even greater to back it up are our actions. And from there, we'll go ahead and have you reflect on what strategic actions will you be making to help support inclusive spaces for your students during an online setting. And from there, I say thank you. If I can get to the slide. There it is. So you're going to go back over to Google Classroom, and pretty much I just explained exactly what the instructions are also going to tell you within Google Classroom. Let's go ahead and just make sure we have it here. It's assignment for session number 3. Reflect on inclusion. You'll have a nice Google Doc here for you to use. And think about this as even a possible activity with your students in the future, having them chart their ideas and actions based on goals or standards that you are trying to execute in your classroom. Again, thank you, and I'll see you for the next session.